Hey guys, you're listening to Wingin' It with Holly. In this podcast series, I'll be sharing the fun and interesting things I've learnt about birds since I started really noticing them 5 years ago. I'm no expert though, so along the way I'll be picking the brains of my knowledgeable birdie friends, the human ones that is, so we can learn and wing it together. You can see birds anywhere, in a city or the countryside, watching from a balcony or your local park. And I'm hoping these short episodes will help you notice and learn more about our feathered friends, especially if you have never taken the time to get to know them before. Swifts are built for the skies. With the longest uninterrupted flight on record, swifts can stay in the air for 10 months straight and will sleep, eat, bathe and even mate whilst flying. So in this episode, I visit a swift hotspot in Brighton with my friend Jack, who can talk for hours about his favourite bird. Ah, swifts. The sound of summer. All right. Alrighty then. Let's talk swifts. So today I have brought my friend Jack out again. Hello.
Hello.
I'm just taking advantage of all your specialist areas, you see. So we had you on a recent podcast because you're a heathland specialist. We spoke about nightjars, and today you've brought me out to talk about swifts, because swifts are a big part of your work. So first off, where are we and why are we here?
So we are firstly we're in Brighton and Hove, but we're in a place to the east of Brighton. It's called Whitehawk, and specifically we're in this place called Chalvington, which is basically a really great site for nesting swifts. And yeah, I can talk for a long time about this site. So yeah.
So we're recording this episode now because swifts are summer migrants. They're one of our summer migrants, and they leave in the autumn. Are we thinking like August, September, October? When do they tend to leave?
So the season for swifts is they're quite short, the season that they spend here in the UK, because people normally sort of associate them as a UK bird, but they actually spend 9 months of their time basically outside of the UK. So that we've only got them for a really short window. They come in May time, and then they start leaving generally the breeders will start leaving at the start of August, going through to mid-August, and some of the non-breeders they'll be leaving as early as now basically.
Right. So yeah, we had to get this recording now. But one of the reasons I wanted to do this episode is I wanted to capture the very sound that's behind us right now. It's the excited screams of the swift, which you say they arrive in May, and I think personally I feel like the moment you start hearing that sound it's like the sign that summer is here, or that it's on its way. So let's first off just explain for those people who don't know what a swift is, what they look like, Jack. So a lot of people think they're quite similar to swallows and house martins and sand martins because of their shape, but obviously they're a lot they're longer. Go on, how would you describe what a swift looks like?
So these are sort of in terms of colour, they're quite plain. They've got a browny black sort of tinge to them, a little bit blue in there, I guess, but ultimately the colours are very dark on them, with a little bit of a whiteness to the throat. But the things to sort of look out for are the really elongated scythe-like wings, and they're they have these really long wings that look like scythes. They have a nickname, and I'm not sure whether or not this is due to their the screams, or whether this is actually due to the scythe shape of their wings. But they're also known as devil birds, and so I don't know whether that's because the the Grim Reaper and things associated with like kind of like death and the devil have like these scythe-like things, or maybe it's just
as in like the shape of the
stuff.
wing is like the shape of the that thing.
Yeah, the scythe, the Grim Reaper holds. So yeah, they've got the really long wings that like kind of give them that sort of that really aerodynamic flight to them. They also have like kind of quite a sort of a short, sharp tail to them. So they actually, swifts are in the same sort of group as swiftlets, but also needle tails as well. So we've got some like kind of swift species in other parts of the world that are known as the needle tails for that specific like kind of ID feature on them, which is those really sharp and short tails.
They're quite forked. Would you say forked tail?
Would sort of a lot often with a swift it comes in at a point, but as like kind of most like kind of birds when they're being very aerodynamic, the tail feathers kind of come out and then back in again. So it will at times look like kind of like slightly forked. At other times when they're really trying to be aerodynamic and like kind of just rush through and like they don't have many turns to them, it'll be like kind of like a needle just to give that sort of really smooth surface for the the air and the wind just to like run over them.
So when you've seen a swift because they are very they stand out for their unique I think they're aerial birds, right? Or are all birds aerial birds actually? Now that I say that, actually.
Well, no, it's a good point because
they're superb flyers.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So they're known as being the most airborne of birds. Like they are meant for the sky, like where you've got like kind of a birds that they like to perch. You've got flightless birds as well, but with the swifts it's all about the air.
They rarely touch the ground, don't they?
Well, the ground itself they don't. No. So like kind of essentially the only time that a swift will like kind of be like kind of perched or like kind of on like a surface as such is when they're breeding. So like kind of for like kind of our breeding swifts, that's 3 months of the year, and the rest they spend entirely in flight. And for non-breeders, they won't land at all. So like kind of until they get up to breeding age, they're spending the whole time out on the air on the wing. And right. Because of that, they've got like kind of these tiny feet that they don't really need to use.
Yeah. So I need to pick your brains about this because I think this is one of the most fascinating things about this bird. It's known for they do almost everything on the wing. Okay. So if you think about that, people. They eat on the wing, they sleep on the wing, they bathe on the wing, they mate on the wing. Hello. We've just got a good circle of swifts around us. They're demonstrating for us right now. So okay, are you ready, Jack? Let me pick your brains. Okay. Oh, actually no. The eating thing is a pretty obvious thing. So I understand that they eat flying insects. So to eat, they don't have to be still to eat. They're just literally, as they fly through the air, they're picking up flying insects as they go, and they're just eating it, right?
Yes, but what is so impressive about them is that they know what they're picking up. Like they can choose what they're going for, so they're able to see their prey and fly at such speeds and pick off the things that they want to eat. Like kind of, they're just so built for like kind of the skies and for flying around and and just like those really sharp turns and twists and all sorts, like kind of, so they're just they're just amazing like kind of birds to watch, and to see them sort of just picking things off out the sky. I feel like I keep on getting flying ants just like sort of dropping off and like falling on me. I don't know whether they're running away from they're choosing to not be in the sky so that they can avoid the swifts.
How does a bird bathe on the wing?
Well, so essentially, like kind of, I mean, there will be opportunities for swifts to basically get up into like kind of bits of like kind of vapor and like kind of like stuff in the sky, like kind of up above, and like kind of and slightly wet wet the wing.
You don't have to whisper that. Just say wet the wing.
The wing. But they will also equally, like, kind of in terms of like kind of getting like water and things like that. You know, they will. You'll see them like kind of, you know, late at night, potentially like kind of or like kind of in the evening, like dropping down over water bodies and just sort of skimming the water and picking up water through there to drink. And yeah, they're just very versatile, like kind of, you know, as well, like kind of, you know, if it's too wet and it's like kind of raining, they'll sort of go above the clouds, and like kind of they'll start, you know, because there's not many insects when it's raining, like, so they'll go above the clouds and they'll start trying to feed on things above there. So they have a lot of movement, you know, all across the sky, like kind of up and down and all sorts, just trying to find the right thing, the right situation.
It's funny because I think I was imagining them sort of like trying to preen in the air, like literally like the way that other birds preen, sort of like getting their beaks into the backs of their wings. They clearly don't do that. They just use the water in the air, right? That's what you just said.
Well, yeah, like they'll be able to like kind of, you know, they're able to like kind of use like kind of moisture, like kind of here and there, and then also as well, like kind of, you know, when you've got breeders and like kind of they're going into the nest, it's a good opportunity to have a little bit of a move around and like kind of, you know, sort things out, like kind of whilst they're in the nest. But yeah, like kind of there's so much that they do like kind of on the wing because they have to, you know, essentially.
So sleep. How do they sleep on the wing? So they're flying whilst they are asleep.
Yes, yeah. So essentially, what they do is they switch off like each like hemisphere of their brain, like kind of you know, consecutively. So like kind of they'll have one side off whilst they're like kind of in a sort of sleep-like state in like basically half of their brain, while the other side is active and navigating and flying, etc. And then they'll switch over, and they just keep switching, and that's how they do that. So like, you know, when it comes to things like migration, that's how they fly just through the night. That's how they fly throughout, like kind of, you know, 12 months of the year, like kind of, you know.
I mean, just think about this. What we're saying is that they are constantly flying. They're not sort of resting or perching in the same way that other birds, which is just incredible, especially like you say, with the fact that they are flying between, say, Europe and Africa. That's a very long way to fly, but they do it without stopping, and so they're doing all these things on the wing. I just find it so amazing.
And they do that really quickly as well, like, so I mean, there's been like kind of like studies that looked into like kind of the time it takes for swifts to migrate, and there was a record of like kind of, you know, of a swift, I believe that it left the UK to migrate back to Africa for the winter on the 31st of July, and it was recorded in the south of Spain on, I believe it was the 2nd or 3rd of August. So it literally took it, you know, 2-3 days to make it all the way like kind of, you know, through to the south of Spain on the edge of Africa, just in that short space of time. But it makes sense because they, you know, they're flying the whole time. They have no time to rest, so they want to get there as quick as possible.
Yeah, no, it isn't. I mean, and I know there are other animals that sort of do this sort of thing. Like I think sharks, because they're never supposed to stop swimming, supposed to stop moving. So I think they also have a way of literally just sort of shutting off half of their brain so that they can sleep, but still move. But yeah, it's just incredible. Mating now. Mating can be complicated and difficult at the best of times, and they've got to do it whilst they're flying. So how does that happen, Joe?
Well, it can.
Do they mount each other in the air? Is that a stupid question? I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's like so like kind of where birds have don't have the same anatomy. It's sort of it's two holes that sort of rub and
so they do have to, a male and a female have to come together, and what, sort of just fly connected for a while? Come on, I want the picture, Jack.
Yeah, so there's essentially like kind of a bit of a dance involved, like sort of, you know, as we like to, you know, we always like to say there's a dance involved when it comes to birds, like, you know,
romanticize it a
exactly,
little bit.
yeah. But yeah, they dance, and yeah, it's not all smooth sailing. There is a bit of rejection in there. Sometimes there's a bit of arguing and like kind of and basically just maybe potentially the female just wanting to make sure that the male is the right suitor, and but yeah, like kind of it's just another thing that they love to do in the air,
just to make things a little bit harder for themselves.
And just as another thing, one thing that they do not do in the air is they don't nest in the air. I just want to put that out there because there was a very recent. I saw a clip of a film. I can't remember what the name of it is, starring Aaron Paul. And he's trying to impress a girl, and he gets so close. We want birds in like references in like kind of films, in like mainstream like films and media. And I was thinking like kind of brilliant swifts, like how amazing is that going to be? Like kind of a big film. And he was so close. And then his fact was that, did you know that swifts nest entirely on the wing? And I was like, oh, you were almost there. I mean,
where did the eggs go?
I know, yeah, like they carry them on their back, yeah. But so close, Aaron Paul, but just not quite there.
I mean, that actually leads me to a good question, which is like, what happens when they stop, and how do they nest?
What do you mean when they stop?
Like when they stop flying. So if they do stop, how long? Is it literally like seconds? Because I mean, I've seen a swift come in, stop for a couple of seconds, and go off again. So obviously, they do that.
Yeah. So like when you see them like kind of potentially going towards a nest site, and then they just sort of they don't quite go in, and then they just sort of latch on a little bit. Yeah, I think. Well, not really sure, but there's a lot of it's a lot of difficulty in trying to navigate through these tiny spaces. Sometimes they just don't quite get it right, and so like kind of then they'll stop, they'll fly back again. Sometimes they do like a little bit of a double take where they look like they're going into the nest, and then they just the last like half second they just quickly turn and dart round like kind of a rooftop, and then they'll swing back round again, and then they'll readjust, and then they'll find that perfect motion to swoop like under and up. Into like kind of a little cavity in the just under the eaves of a house, or like kind of there's like air bricks as well, like kind of when there's like kind of an air brick that's like sort of slightly disintegrated a little bit, they might find an opportunity to get like kind of in and around into the cavity wall. And then there's a whole variety of different like nooks and crannies that they tend to try and seek out as nesting opportunities.
So they do. Yeah, that's how they choose. Their nesting sites are sort of little holes, little gaps in typically older buildings that will have these kinds of things, like old houses and churches and stuff. But obviously this has caused a bit of a problem, hasn't it? Because these days there are so many modern renovations of houses that these small places that they choose to nest in are fast disappearing, which is having an impact on the numbers of swifts that we have.
Yeah, so like you say, like kind of people obviously naturally like kind of when you see a hole that's generally like kind of from a human perspective not supposed to be there, and people want to like kind of do maintenance on their house. So you see a lot of like kind of old style buildings. You've got like kind of the like the fascia board and like kind of the eaves, like kind of so the basically the bits that sit underneath the sort of the edge of the roof tiles. You've got these like kind of normally these bits of in the olden times, like kind of I say olden times, like kind of just a few like kind of decades ago, they would have been built out of wood, and then so they create these little holes. Now with like kind of new technologies and new materials, they're being built with things like PVC, for example, and so that doesn't wear away in the same way that wood does, and it doesn't create those opportunities. So essentially those nest sites become no more, and they get lost to swifts, and that's one of the uphill battles that we have with trying to protect swifts and provide opportunities for them, is is by retaining the sites that we currently have, or providing alternative ones. Things like putting up a Swift nest box, or having Swift bricks that you can get these like kind of bricks that are implemented into the design of buildings, like kind of so it just sits within the brickwork, and then there's a space, there's an opportunity for Swifts to breed.
Right. And this space like doesn't have any impact whatsoever on like the rest of the house or the people living there. It's literally just it's built straight into the construction of the house, and it means that there's an opportunity for them to discover a nest. Because the problem that they have is that obviously, so because they're with us for like the summer, they fly back to Africa. And say renovations are done on a house in the time that they've gone, when they come back looking for the same, so they nest in the same place every year. So they come back looking for these nest sites, and if they're gone, then that's their home destroyed, and they've got nowhere to nest. And I assume they just have to desperately try and find somewhere else. But yeah, so there are nest boxes that you can buy that they're specifically built for swifts with a certain shaped hole, which isn't suitable for other birds. Of course, that doesn't mean other birds won't take those opportunities to get in there, but it means they're just kind of the perfect size and shape. And yeah, the problem now we have is that swifts are now on what we call the red list, which is a list of birds that are scarily going into decline, to the point where they're sort of at risk of extinction if we don't drastically do something about it.
Yeah, no, exactly. We've got the basically it's the birds of conservation concern, and so that's what forms the UK red list, and yeah, very recently, so the swift used to be on the amber list, so like kind of at risk of like kind of severe declines, but very recently, so last year, it was bumped up to that red list for the reasons of such significant declines. I think the figure is since the 1970s. We've had a 57% decline in swifts, which is incredible. We've lost over half of our numbers in just over 50 years.
And it would be devastating, I think, to lose these birds from our skies, because they're so cool. They're so cool. So in terms of the swift boxes and stuff, and the work that you have done as part of your role, you work for a nature conservation charity, and you do a lot of work with swifts, and you work with swift projects and volunteers who go out and do swift surveys for you. Is there anything else you wanted to share sort of about the work that you're doing to sort of help swifts, certainly in this area?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a few things that kind of people can do. I mean, one thing is just knowing where there are swifts about. So, for example, the RSPB, they have a web app that you can use. It's called Swift Mapper. And basically you can go on there and you can record down your observations of swifts, and that's UK wide. We have our own like kind of project and our own survey methods that we do in Brighton and Hove. But Swift Mapper is perfect for people that want to just sort of do ad hoc records. If you see a swift, get it on Swift Mapper, because the more we know about them, the better. If you know that there are swifts about and they're nearby, maybe put up a nest box. It's just a really easy way of providing that opportunity for them. And then just the other things that sort of are all about like kind of creating more space for urban biodiversity and building that up. One of the other big worries and causes for concern for swifts is the loss of prey, loss of their like flying insect and vertebrate prey, and with having less and less like kind of green space around in our urban areas, that's only going to cause further decline. So do some planting, get some wildflowers out there, get some pollinator friendly stuff going, and like kind of
encourage the insects.
Exactly, yeah, encourage the insects, and also as well, like kind of because we're talking about urban environments, it would be great to like kind of have more like sort of community empowerment and movement towards sort of like kind of, you know, engage with your local plan or your city plans, and like sort of try and advocate for more green infrastructure, for more spaces for both people to have access to nature and for health and well-being and all sorts of other benefits, but also for wildlife and you know, for species like swift, because they need it. You know, swifts, unfortunately, as beautiful as the screams in the sky are, they don't have a voice, and so like kind of we have to provide that for them.
Very, very well put there, Jack. Thank you. Thank you for talking to us about swifts today. I mean, it's been really great. You've taken us to a fabulous spot in Brighton, which they've just been screaming above us the whole time. So this is obviously a hotspot, and they obviously love this area for a particular reason.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I was going to mention that because so yeah, this is one of our best sites in Brighton and Hove, and it's got a really interesting sort of story to it. So there are a series of buildings around here, and they were they're like owned by the Guinness Trust, and when they were first kind of created, the Guinness Trust brought in a French architect that had this interesting design to the buildings, and essentially if you like kind of look around, you can see. So when I was talking about like kind of the eaves and the fascia boards and like kind of these wooden sort of structures in old buildings, these are made of wood, but the eaves are open. So basically what that means is that if you can like kind of visualize, you've got the board that goes along the front, but then underneath it's completely open. So there's loads of gaps. So essentially swifts can come in at any point and then just like kind of swoop up under and then get like kind of, you know, underneath the tiles and all sorts, and like kind of, and so the nesting opportunities, it's just like sort of, it's just getting like kind of, you know, better and better each year. So the colony is, you know, compared to the trends around the UK, the colony is actually growing because all of these, you know, opportunities are available to them, and you know, there's loads of like sort of green space nearby. We've got like East Brighton Park, there's also Sheepcote Valley as well, and there's all these sort of areas for invertebrate prey. So this is a real hotspot for swifts in Brighton and Hove, and unfortunately, you know, those sort of hotspots are getting few and far between. So this is a really treasured site. So it's just always great to kind of come along here and just see so many of them.
So again, it would be like the swifts have found these spots because of the gaps that have happened to be sort of available on these buildings under these roofs. But if they were taken down, that would devastate this colony, because obviously so many of them live around here. So I think there's just being a bit having awareness of like the sort of the development of houses, and how if a building has to be taken down, and if it could be rebuilt in a way that could benefit swifts, as long as that consideration is made, and you know, either a nest box is sort of built into it, or you can buy one, and that's exactly what I've done this year. So I've just bought a swift nest box, which I got this very lovely man that you recommended to come and install it for me. But of course, you also have to have a bit of patience with these things, because the swifts. So I actually got my nest box up this year in April, but I knew that it wouldn't be occupied by a swift this year, because the ones coming back from Africa this year would never have known that this new swift box exists. So it needed to be sort of there to be discovered, and hopefully next year perhaps, fingers crossed, a young one from this year will come back this next year, like with that space in mind, and hopefully it will be occupied. So that's the hope anyway. If you could do anything today, if you're inspired by this podcast and these excited screams around us that we don't want to leave the sky, then please consider getting a nest box, a swift nest box.
And also, like, kind of, you know, get a little flower pot, whatever you've got, like, kind of, you know, around. If you've got like kind of a balcony, or like kind of just a windowsill, or you know, if you've got a garden, a patio, whatever it is, just sort of get some like kind of flowers, some like native plants in there, and then just, you know, providing all those opportunities for swifts, for you know, starlings, house sparrows, you know, whatever it is, all these urban creatures that call like kind of these, that share these spaces with us, and call it home. So yeah, it's just, do those like simple things can make such a difference and can really help to create biodiversity right on your doorstep.
There you go. These swifts are one of your favourite birds, aren't they?
Yeah. We've been really lucky actually, because the past 2 podcasts that I've been on have been 2 of my favourite birds. Mainly, I don't know. Maybe it's because you go and see nightjar like kind of in the evening, towards night time, and the same for swifts as well. They're most active towards night, and I think that just works for me. Like I don't really want to.
Summer evening.
Yeah, I don't really want to get up like in the in the early hours of the morning to do a survey. So I quite like these birds. If only just for the sort of like late evening sort of work.
Basically, they're just more like you, I guess. They're not early risers, and they like to. The party starts in the evening.
Exactly.
All right, thank you so much, Jack. And see you for another one sometime soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and if you have any birdie questions you'd like me to explore in this podcast, you can get in touch via my Instagram @wingingitwithholly.